Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion with the experts from Land O'Lakes Purina Feeds today. And Dr. Cosby, I want to turn to you for just a moment. We've talked a lot about up to weaning, but what would cause a cow-calf producer to keep ownership and retain ownership after weaning?
Yeah, post-weaning, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, would be replacement heifer development. It's where most folks develop their replacement cows from within. So that would be one situation. Another may be that the price slides and marketing windows, markets telling the producer, make these cattle heavier. And then as you talked about earlier, Kevin, producers often say, man, I got a lot of hay, I got a lot of forage, how best to utilize that? Maybe putting some economical gains on some calves post-weaning would be an option.
So as you work out in the field, what length of time are we typically talking about here?
Probably the shortest we'd think about would be a VAC 45 type program where we're looking at 45 days post-weaning, targeting one of those special marketing programs, calf sales that Dr. McHoney talked about, to 90, 100 days where maybe we're taking those spring-born calves rather than selling in that market low we talked about earlier, taking those to 750 pounds first part of January to traditionally what's been a stronger marketing time.
So if you're talking about hitting a particular marketing window or video auction or what have you, predictability's got to be important.
Yeah, that's right. We can scratch out the marketing plan and what we're going to feed and what we're going to do to hit this weight and maybe even lock in that price. And it comes down to then can we consistently do that with the ever-changing weather and what Mother Nature may throw at us, and that's where our Accuration cattle limiter programs can come in to really help us supplement that forage and put some predictability into this so we can consistently hit those targeted weights at the specific time we need to hit them to capture those marketing dollars.
You know, another area that you'd mentioned briefly is retaining ownership of replacement heifers and raising and breeding your own replacement heifers. Obviously, predictability is pretty important when it comes to getting those heifers ready for breeding as well. Sure.
We know when we want to breed them the following spring on a spring calving herd and how many days we've got to get there, and we need to get her to 65% of her mature weight if she's an English or continental type cattle, or 75% on a Brahman or Brahman crossbred animal. So how can we do that predictably? Again, it's with the Accuration cattle limiter program on forage can help us with that.
Now, I know in our operation we're in a situation where we have some forage to feed, and so we really background our heifers and grow our heifers out on a total mixed ration. What do you say to folks like me who may want to use a total mixed ration in heifer development?
Sure, and there's nothing wrong with that. I work with a lot of producers that do that have that equipment, the mixer wagon and the bunks and those type of things, and I'll be glad to help build those kind of rations to get that accomplished. However, you've got to have the bunks and you got to have the mixer wagon, you got to have somebody driving the truck or the tractor, and so labor and equipment cost. We can do that very effectively with bulk feeders, minimize the labor, and I guess my bias, Kevin, is do it in an environment that's more similar to the way that future cow is going to spend the rest of her life.
Sure, keep her sound and moving. You bet. You know, we've talked about IM technology, and I want you to elaborate just a little bit more about how that can relate to a kind of a low roughage finisher kind of a ration for those folks that choose to finish some cattle.
Sure. We think about the intake modifying technology on a range situation where we're using the supplements to maximize forage utilization. You think, how can that work for me in a feedlot scenario with a low roughage ration? Well, roughage in a finishing ration is really in the ration to help keep the cattle on feed consistently, and that's the purpose of roughage in a finisher ration. With the intake modifying technology programs like Accuration Finisher, what we can do is break up those meal patterns of that animal into small snacks, prevent any kind of, or help minimize the risk of grain overload, and can therefore lower the amount of roughage, or in some cases virtually eliminate the need for roughage in a finishing ration.
Wow. Now, I know you were telling me before, you were talking in terms of 6 to 10% range, which seems like an awful little amount of roughage.
Sure.
Does that work, and can you even go lower than that? I mean, that's amazing to me.
Yeah, and we think about, how many pounds that feedlot animal's consuming, typically 18 to 24 pounds of dry matter, 6 to 10%. We're talking, a pound and a half to 2 pounds of roughage. So in a large commercial feed yard, that adds up to a lot of roughage in a day, and so by lowering that roughage level even further can help optimize some of our feed efficiency responses. and really also help reduce the manure output and reduce the labor involved with pen cleaning and improve pen conditions, quite honestly.
Isn't that a pretty hot ration, though?
It is a hot ration, and you think, well, that's got to just be for professional cattle feeders, commercial cattle feeders, and true, it has been and will continue to be, we think, an effective ration for commercial feed yards, but it's really for feed yards of any size, even down to a cow-calf producer that may want to finish out some of his own calves at home.
But thinking about the equipment required for that, I guess my question is, isn't it a little cost prohibitive for a cow-calf guy to get geared up to do something like that and begin finishing his own cattle?
It would be if you didn't have the the mixer wagon or facilities to process the corn and those type of things. Fortunately, with the Accuration Finisher program, it can be as simple as feeding those cattle through a bulk feeder, either mixing it on farm or having your local Purina dealer bring out the ration, delivering it right to the bulk feeder and finishing those cattle out at home with very little equipment needed.
Seems like a big paradigm shift and a big step for a cow-calf person to make that shift. Why would they want to do it, or where have you seen this really work?
The folks that I've worked with that choose to finish their calves out at home, and it's often not their entire calf crop, Kevin. It's they've been thinking about maybe sending some cattle to a feed yard, but before they do, they want to know what do I have in my genetic program?
Sure.
How well are they going to perform? And so they'll test it at home, finishing some cattle. They've been buying good bulls, good genetics, and don't feel like they're capturing the value out of the money they've invested in genetics. Go ahead and finish them out and capture more of that value. Or the old farmer feeder method of how can I market my locally raised grains through the cattle would be another option.
Makes a lot of sense. Let's look out over the horizon for a minute, and I want to ask you this, Dr. Scott. What do you see as you research every day and think about the future of beef cattle nutrition? What do you see some of the exciting trends and opportunities to be?
Well, by far and away, the most exciting thing that we've seen in a long time comes from the human side of nutrition and development, and it's kind of an interaction between physiological development and nutrition, how those two are interacted together, and it's called fetal programming.
I'm glad you brought that up, because as a registered producer, I've read a lot about this, and I'm intrigued by it. But define what you mean by fetal programming. Tell us more.
Yeah, fetal programming is a term, as I mentioned, which came from the human side, and it refers to basically an optimal nutrition, or you can look at it as an altered environment for when a female is gestating, and how that environment affects the growth and development of the fetus, and it actually has lifetime consequences on the growth and development of that calf after it hits the ground for its entire life. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, but I guess the question I have is, do you see that fundamentally changing how we manage a set of mother cows?
Well, it already has. And the reason why I say that is we've been talking to some cattlemen for the past couple of years about fetal programming, and in a way it gets down to common sense. Two common questions I ask. Number one is, ask you have kids, right?
Yes.
Right. So the day one that your wife was pregnant and went to the doctor, the first thing he told her to do was to eat and take prenatal vitamins.
Vitamins, that's right.
What's the first thing we do as cattlemen when our cows get pregnant? Nothing. Right. The other thing is that if your wife loses weight during gestation, during pregnancy, that's a big red flag.
I didn't talk to her about her weight during pregnancy.
Or any of us. But in the human side, if we lose weight during gestation, that's a big red flag.
Yeah.
And in the U.S., the majority of our cows lose weight throughout pregnancy when you get in particularly that last trimester because of the adverse effects of the winter. Dr. Dickerson talked earlier about having it around a body condition score 6. It's like having a parka around. If you don't have condition, then you can't protect yourself. So the thing we have to remember is that there's this developing placenta, and that placenta feeds the fetus. And there's lifetime consequences of undernutrition. It's called maternal hunger on the human side. Unfortunately, maternal hunger is part of our world on a mama cow side on pasture.
That's interesting. So tell me about the research that you've done that would indicate some real live performance differences ultimately on that calf based on how we take care of that mother cow.
You bet. Well, about 10 years ago, we started a program which was kind of innovative at the time and still is today, where we were offering supplement 365 days a year for a cow. And you say, why do you want to do that? Well, the reason why is that forage quality is inconsistent. And you can't tell when your cows are losing condition. You don't know that they've just dropped a half a unit of body condition because you look at them all the time. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we provide a supplement out there. It's got the built-in intake modifying technology in it so the cows don't overeat. And what we've found is that when we have our supplement out, free choice supplement out, for about 4 months of the year, compared to having it out every day, the cows actually eat less on a yearly basis than they do when it's just out for about 4 months of the year. The reason why is they're so behind on nutrition, they're catching up. They're so hungry. That maternal hunger and that drive is there for energy. The neat thing about this, we've got a reduction in total supplement that the cows have consumed, but we've seen that it supports the growth and development of the calf, reproduction, weaning weights. There's data from the University of Nebraska, a lot of interesting information on feeding the fetus the last trimester. What we're doing is feeding throughout first, second, and third trimesters, and that's when a lot of the organ systems develop. And the other thing is we're providing supplemental nutrients for mama for lactation. So it's kind of a twofold event. So it's really interesting information that we're getting back from cattlemen.
Well, that is interesting and some new thoughts for us to consider and put in place in our own operation.